Hi everyone, it's Amy. I'm back to share another little lesson. I'm trying to refine my sound, so I've got this little mic. I hope you don't mind. Alrighty, so the reason I do this is I came to a point where I realized that I needed to share some of the little tiny lessons that I have that can be useful for people around the place, and even if they just help a little tiny bit, then that's my job done. I come from an anthropology background, social science, mental health, and I learned lots of things from my clients, but also from my personal experiences and some of the wonderful people that I've had in my life. So today I'd like to talk about the importance of the stories we tell ourselves. The stories we tell ourselves really do shape our reality. If you're telling yourself a story that you're waiting for something to happen, you're waiting to get the strength, you're waiting to get the courage, then you're always going to be waiting. If you're telling yourself that you are the victim and that things always happen to you and that life isn't fair, well, that's exactly what you're going to align with. If you're telling yourself that life gets better and things are around the corner that you don't expect, that can actually be more amazing than you imagined, well, that can also be true. So I highly recommend that you take a moment to do a little scan of how you speak to yourself and what you're telling yourself. Okay? So, going into that, how we speak to ourselves matters. So, the tone we're using, the language we use. Are you telling yourself that you're negative things like stupid or slow or not good enough? Are you telling yourself that it's okay to make a little mistake and that you're going to do better next time? Are you telling yourself that you're doing human and that isn't always perfect? Or are you berating yourself and creating a caustic inner world that isn't likely to align with much that will be positive? Because at the end of the day, we do need to be our own cheerleader, our own parent, our own friend. The relationship you have with yourself is so vital, and we must have an inner dialogue that aligns with harmony, that aligns with nurturing, and aligns with safety. Otherwise, we keep ourselves in a place of defense, protection, mistrust. Okay, so where do we get the stories that we tell ourselves? How do they form? Well, I think a lot of you would probably have a bit of a clue there, and a lot of these things can start in childhood. Now, your parents aren't to blame, they were just doing what they knew at the time, and they probably came from a long line of people who were doing what they knew at the time, and so on and so forth. Such is life. However, you can own the parts of the story that are yours, and you can give back the parts that aren't. So, your parents and how they may have spoken to you might have been in times of frustration, might have been in times where they were overwhelmed, might have just been in times where they weren't managing their own emotions very well. And sometimes, quite often, this becomes your inner dialogue. So if you're noticing that there's anger or frustration or impatience going on with your inner dialogue, you can probably say, hey, that's not mine. I can give it back. And you gently guide yourself back onto another way of thinking, another way of talking to yourself, different language. So we can replace things like, oh, I always get that wrong, to, I'm still learning that bit. Or, these things always happen to me, to, I've had this experience a few times. The gentler you can speak to yourself, the stronger you're going to be. The more you're going to feel safe within yourself, and the more you're going to come out of defense mode, the more you're going to come out of fight or flight mode, and the more you're actually going to start being your own cheerleader. The way you frame your reality, are you a side character? Are you waiting for someone else's line before you can say yours? Or are you the main character? Does the journey follow you? I think that's a very important one, because I know when we come to our last days and we look over our lives, were you the star of your show or were you a side character? Because you'll realize in those last days you were the main character all along. And if you can realize it during the vibrant parts of your life, you can actually embrace it. You can actually play around with it. You can actually even add theme music. I do sometimes. One of my favorite theme musics to add is the Jurassic Park. It's where they discover Jurassic Park. I'm going to do it, so forgive me, but I love that, having that as background music in the story of my life when I find a new nature spot that I really love. So if I find a new waterfall or a new picturesque place that's just golden and gorgeous, that will sound in my mind. But you can add theme music. You can shift the way you talk to yourself. You can shift the way you're seeing yourself in your life. The stories you tell yourself shape your reality. I'd like for you to think about someone that spoke to you well, somebody that spoke to you in a nurturing voice. It might have been a teacher, it might have been a parent, it might have been a grandparent, an auntie, or it might even be a character on a show that you've seen. If you can start mirroring that type of self-talk, speak to yourself like you're the most gorgeous little child who's still figuring it all out, because you can't be mad at a little child who's still learning, and you sure as hell should not be getting mad at yourself for still learning, because life is a massive trial of lessons, but it's also a massive bunch of rewards. And I suppose we've just learnt to focus on such negative aspects of life that we barely even savour the good bits. So you get to choose if you're the hero. You get to choose if you have the power. You get to choose. So, what story are you telling yourself? Alright, thank you so much for listening. Even if this just helps a tiny little bit, I've done my part. Thank you.